I'm especially excited about tonight because of the work these folks are doing about topics that are very close to my heart. They're going to talk to us about bullying. They're going to be talking to us about the use of data. And they're going to be talking to us about how do you mobilize and harness the wisdom and energy of young people. And they have done this work very effectively for a long time. I just want to say a quick word about bullying, because I think that there are people out there who still aren't taking bullying quite seriously. About 30% of kids are bullied on school property alone. 30% of kids is we're talking about a very high percentage of kids in a given year. A lot of these kids are experiencing struggles with depression and self-esteem. And bullying is often very connected to shame, and shame is something that can haunt you your whole life. So this is a serious problem, and a problem that has very long-standing consequences. I think the best way to combat bullying is to change, or one of the best ways is to change social norms. And you change social norms by recognizing that young people are often in the best position to change social norms. They have the skinny, they know who's getting left in, who's getting left out, and they also know the leverage points. So another reason I'm very excited to hear from these folks. Let me just introduce them briefly, and I will not describe their many impressive accomplishments. But in 2003, Nancy Lublin came to Do Something and transformed it into DoSomething.org. It is an organization that leverages technology like Facebook, texting, and Twitter to reach its audience. It is reaching 2.2 million teens right now, so huge reach. And she is with Jeff Bladt, who currently works as a data scientist at DoSomething.org, overseeing site optimization, lead generation for national campaigns, and the development of data products. Before coming to DoSomething.org, he worked with 200 of the largest U.S. orchestras, creating predictive models of American symphonic attendance and budgets. So alongside demographic changes and behavior shifts in the population, both of these folks have really, really interesting histories. I just had the pleasure of meeting with them for an hour and a half. They are vibrant people doing really exciting, intelligent work, and it is my great pleasure to introduce them.
Okay, now I have to be vibrant. Thank you for that. It really was a fun afternoon. This has been great, thanks. And first part of the day also at some other school in town. I don't know, I won't mention it. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Nancy Lublin. I am the CEO and chief old person of DoSomething.org. DoSomething.org is the largest organization for teenagers and social change in America. What we do is we run campaigns. We will run around 24 campaigns this year, and it's all stuff that kids can do that don't require money, an adult, or a car. And have a material impact on an issue. I'm going to run through a few case studies in a minute. Oh, there we go. I'm going to run through a few case studies in a minute, but what I want to start with first is five sort of principles that we think about when we think about young people and how they're different and how they do social change and how they interact with people and the world around them differently than, say, old people do. By old people, by the way, I mean anybody over the age of 25. Apologies. Okay. So the first thing is, for example, when I grew up, there was Jif and there was Skippy. There were two kinds of peanut butter, and I remember being blown away when Crunchy came out. And all of a sudden, you could have actual nuts in your peanut butter. That was like amazing, and now you had more options. Now there's sodium-free, fat-free, organic, all-natural, and perhaps my favorite, nut-free peanut butter. There are tons and tons of different kinds of peanut butter. It's all customized, and there's lots of choices. I remember being quite satisfied with ABC, NBC, and CBS. I thought I had a lot of choices on a Saturday morning, and then I had to go and demand I want my MTV. And that was like, wow, now I have tons and tons of choices. Well, now there are 1,000 cable channels, lots and lots of TV, and you don't even watch TV. You DVR it and you watch YouTube. There are so much choice. When we think of doing social change, when we think of working with young people, we have to start with choice as an assumption. Choice is something that young people today have grown up with. It's why we offer so many different campaigns as opposed to focusing on one pure issue. It's why we have so many different things going on the website that kids can opt into and select, because they're used to choice. They expect choice. Second thing is, young people don't buy albums. I remember waiting for the Police Synchronicity album. I was very excited to get my hands on that album. The Police were an actual group. I'm not talking about the cops. That was funny. Anyway, Sting. Thank you. Yes, Sting. So, and Andy Summer. Come on. You buy one song, and maybe you even customize that song. Or as my colleague Jeff pointed out to me, now you can even just rent that song. You customize things. You don't just buy what the option is, because even in the Synchronicity album, there were a couple of stinkers on that album. And you just wouldn't put up with that today. You would buy like the songs that you like, and then you'd like remix them your way. Burger King, you'd make your burger your way. Nike ID, you make the sneakers you want. You make your iPod the way you want. Everything is your way, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I didn't have it that way. When I was younger, it was like, this is the offering, take it or leave it. But everything now is customized, and I'm not going to be able to change that about you. You are a leopard with spots, and I love your spots. They're beautiful, so we're going to work around those spots. So we offer you things that you can customize, and creativity likes constraints. So we give you some constraints, but we let you make these campaigns your own. The third thing is, I want you to imagine for a second if Martin Luther King had given his famous "I Have a Dream" speech at home, in the shower, to a bar of soap. If there had been no one listening, there'd been no followers. Or if the first person who climbed on the Berlin Wall and everybody just looked around while he sort of chipped away at it and just stood there drinking and watching, instead of all climbing on the wall with him. That one guy would have been put in a straitjacket and hauled away. But instead there were followers. There were a lot of drunk college students who climbed on the wall with him and started chipping away at the Berlin Wall. And thankfully there were a lot of people in Washington, D.C. that day, and people before that and after that, who listened to Dr. King. We've always needed followers. We love followers at Do Something, and we believe that it's possible to lead from the middle. It's a concept we talked about earlier today. We think that we not only need presidents in the world, but we need vice presidents and followers, other people that participate in social change and shift norms. The fourth thing is speed. 20 years ago, when I was at school down the road in Providence, at that better Ivy institution. Sorry, I had to get one and dig in. That was funny too. You guys are not laughing and you're hurting my feelings. Thank you. All right, there we go. Way, okay. Thank you. Woohoo. Okay. So 20 years ago, when I was in school, you like printed out a flyer off your computer. You went to Kinko's. You made Xerox copies or photocopies. You plastered campus. You like pasted it on things. And then a week later, you held your first meeting and you hoped people came and you started to do your social change together. Now, you get an idea, you make it your status update. Within 10 minutes, 40 of your friends have liked it, shared it, commented on it, and bam, you have an organization. You might not even start the organization. You might just start social change without even bothering with the organization. It's fast. It's immediate. You don't wait. You expect a response immediately. Most of you, your primary form of communication is text messaging. Text messaging is how young people communicate with each other. 83% of text messages are returned within 14 minutes. When your primary form of communication is expecting a response in 14 minutes, you are just a heck of a lot faster than like Rick is. Your world is just faster. Sorry, but I'm going to use you as the quintessential old person today. I'm just going to go with it. I've spent the last 2 hours with him. I feel like it's fair game. So, so we have to build automation into our SMS flows. We have to build and expect that things are going to happen quickly, that campaigns are going to have a very short lifespan. You fall in and out of love in a week. You like Justin Bieber 1 second and hate Justin Bieber 2 weeks later. You don't have sort of long, drawn-out, researched love affairs anymore. Things are very fast. Social change needs to be built that way also. And the fifth thing is cost. How many of you here, and please do raise your hand, has as much money as Bill Gates? Darn. Because I was really going to ask you to like meet me outside in the hallway. Yeah, not many of us has that kind of deep pocket. But what's awesome is you don't need to. The cost of building a website has hit the floor. The cost of doing social change, the cost of shifting norms, of shifting thinking has been dramatically reduced. You no longer have to do your fancy, expensive focus groups, your direct mail pieces, your phone banking. It's much cheaper and easier and faster than it ever was. And that's all incredibly exciting for an organization like DoSomething.org that believes that Whitney Houston was wrong about so many things, clearly wrong about drugs, clearly her marriage, but mostly wrong about that song, I Believe the Children. Can you sing with me? I believe the children are future. Rick, sing. Teach them well and let them lead. It's a horrible song because the whole song is about how young people are like the future. And our basic philosophy, if you remember nothing else about my presentation today, please remember that I sang that Whitney Houston song and that we hate that song because it's exactly the wrong message. We actually think young people are awesome now and have incredible power now to shift things and do things. They're thought leaders. The reason that you wear a seatbelt is because young people for a generation said to their parents, Mom, why aren't you wearing a seatbelt? One of the reasons tobacco rates are down is because young people looked to their mom and dads and said, ew, that's gross, stop smoking. Young people are helping turn down thermostats around climate change. Young people are thought leaders in their homes and in their schools now while they're 15. All right, I brought you 3 case studies before I turn it over to bullying. I'm like the entree and Jeff is like the dessert today. Okay, so the first one, can anybody, this is a young homeless person. Homelessness is always one of the top causes that teens care about. When you look at the analytics, homelessness and animals are actually always in the top 5 of things that teens care about. And so we knew that we had to do something on homelessness. We had to run a homeless campaign. So we called all the youth shelters and said, when a homeless kid comes to your shelter, a 17-year-old homeless kid, what's the first thing he asks for? Does anybody want to take a guess? What is it that young people want? Young homeless people when they get to a shelter. Anyone? Internet access. What else? Food. Shower. Yeah. So it's blue jeans. It's jeans. They want jeans. They want to feel like everybody else. Most of you are probably wearing jeans or wore jeans to school, to class. They want to feel normal like everyone else. He could wear those jeans tomorrow with a different top and nobody would know the difference. He can wear those jeans every day for a week without washing them and no one would chat about it. And he can wear them winter, spring, summer, fall. Jeans are great that way. So we ran a campaign called Teens for Jeans. And we had kids collecting jeans on their campuses. Moms were happy because kids were cleaning out their closets and kids were learning about the issue of youth homeless. And in 3.5 weeks, we collected over 1 million pairs of jeans. We partnered with a company called Aeropostale. Anybody know Aeropostale? Aeropostale is the youth brand where the models are wearing shirts, as opposed to some of the other youth clothing brands where they're not. And 1 in 3 high schools in America participated in this campaign last year. We ran the campaign in January, partnering with Aeropostale. Now, anyone who knows anything about retail or shopping knows that when you get your credit card bill from the holidays in early January, you stop shopping. So what Aeropostale really needs is foot traffic in January and February, and they estimate that we sent between 300 and 350,000 people into their stores to drop off jeans in early Q1 when they needed foot traffic most. So we had 1 new member join us every 60 seconds, becoming part of Do Something. It's a massive, massive scaled campaign. And the reason it's successful is there's a very clear call to action. The money, the sponsor, Aeropostale, was a great partner, getting the word out, being a brand kids love. And also it was done locally. It was done in their schools. It was something familiar to them. It was something easy for them to do. Next case study. This is all of our nightmares. Every teen girl's nightmare, but also every parent's nightmare. I say this as the parent of a daughter. Teen pregnancy. And again, we looked at the analytics, and we saw that teenagers care about teen pregnancy. It's a top thing that they talk about. And we looked at the research, and most people focusing on teen pregnancy will say to you that if you tell this girl, look, if you get pregnant now at 17, you are likely to make on average $100,000 less someday. She doesn't care. She's not thinking about someday. If you tell her you're not going to end up with your boyfriend if you have a baby with him now when you're older, she'll say, oh no, we'll beat the odds. Our love is forever. So long-term impact doesn't really work with them. But if you say you're not going to fit your homecoming dress next weekend, she is horrified. If you tell her that she won't be able to see the Twilight premiere in November, again, horrified. Short-term impact. The other thing is everybody seems to focus on her for teen pregnancy, and arguably he is at least 50% of the problem. So we thought that we needed to do a campaign that would focus on him as well. And so what we did was we impregnated his cell phone. We essentially turned their phones into phone babies. We sent you gave us someone's mobile number. You can try it now. I think it's still turned on, or if you want to ask, text Alicia and make sure it's on. If you text the word baby to 38383, you can opt in, and it'll say, do you want a phone baby or not? And then I will warn you, tomorrow morning at 6:30 in the morning, which I think is generous, at 6:30 in the morning, you will start getting 24 hours of super annoying text messages from your virtual phone baby. Things like, wah, wah, I need my diaper changed. Or around lunchtime, it'll say, hey, I'm hungry too, are you going to feed me? And maybe my favorite text message in the play, the word plurp. Not sure what that is, but as a parent, you're not always sure what's coming out of your child. So what's exciting about this is that's how many phone babies we delivered in 5 weeks. It was a huge opt-in. We thought we'd have 15,000 people opt into this game, and we had 101,000. It was pretty terrific. And the best part, we surveyed them, because of course we had their mobile number. And 1 in 2 told us that they were more likely to talk to someone about teen pregnancy and having sex, and that is the silver bullet. All the research will tell you that if young people are talking about teen pregnancy, they are more likely to make smart decisions, less likely to impregnate someone, become pregnant. That's a good thing. Why this worked? Again, a very simple call to action. Gaming. If you look at the Jane McGonigal TED Talk on gaming, where there's surprise and pride and epic wins, it's a good thing if you didn't kill your baby during the day, you know, with your phone baby. You were surprised by the message that came in. It was fun. It was a little bit silly at times. And then lastly, it was on their phones, your prized possession if you were a teenager, your phone. So we went to them instead of having them come to us. This is not case study 4. We're not very good at counting, apparently, to do something. This is case study 3. This dog in a shelter. I mean, nobody went, oh, you should have sighed. So you did? Okay, excellent. So somewhere around 60% of animals in shelters in the United States are euthanized. Cats, dogs, those animals in shelters. It's sad. And again, animals are one of those top causes that young people care about. And the reason that they're euthanized instead of adopted is this photo. It's black and white. The dog looks like it's in jail in the cage. It's a little scary looking. Usually they look kind of mangy or full of fleas. So why wouldn't you go buy the cute Yorkie at the mall? Or, you know, go with the pure breed Wheaton or something, or you know what you're getting. So it's just bad marketing. Who takes the best photos right now? Them, on their phones. So we're sending them into shelters all across America to be photographers and take pictures. Yes, thank you, Moan, that's fine. To take pictures on their phones of animals and upload them to our mobile app and our Facebook app. If you're going to moan at that one, wait for this one. The celebrity spokesperson for this campaign is Nigel Barker, famed fashion photographer. So it actually does make sense. We didn't just go for the name. He's also a photographer. So they take great pictures. And so we've had over 60,000 shares. This is a campaign, what I would call a maker-sharer campaign. Most of you, how many of you go on YouTube at least once a week? But how many of you are actually making a YouTube video once a week? No, very few of you. Most of us lurk. We're sharers. We like, we comment, we share, but we don't make. A small percentage of people are makers. So one of the mistakes a lot of people make is they build campaigns for makers, when actually you should be building campaigns for sharers. So we've only had about 500 animals uploaded this campaign, but with those 60,000 shares. And the reason it's successful, again, it's on their phone, and there's a mobile app. It's on Facebook, and also it's something that they love. We play it into them. So that's the basicness of my message. I'm going to call up my colleague now to really deliver dessert, Jeff. That's really how we operate. But Jeff's going to tell you about what we've been doing with bullying and some of the exciting findings from the data exhaust, from what we've been doing, and how we think about data in general. He and his colleague, our other data scientist, Bob Philbin, who I think is going to be joining us later, have a really interesting philosophy on how not-for-profits and how all companies should be thinking about data. Thanks. Okay.
All right, so I think a common thread that ran through all those case studies that Nancy talked about, and just thinking about do something at the largest level, is we have a lot of digital interactions, and part of that's this data exhaust. So everything they do leaves a trail. Every single interaction is being stored. Storage is free. When you think about the amount of data we have in the world, take everything that was stored or created up to the year 2005, we create that every 48 hours now. We're at a hockey stick moment with data collection. Our organization's no different. So when we think about DoSomething.org, at the data science there, we think about it as almost a .organism. So that's us and all our sort of nodes, all these 2.4 million people doing something. It's our nervous system almost. We have this real-time response from 2.4 million kids, 800,000 people on our website in a month, 600,000 people we text with on a daily basis, and all of this leaves a trail, and all of it's just sitting there to be looked at. So when we're trying to think about our organization, how we use data, we sort of approach it in these 4 steps. You have monitor and detect, and that's just making sure you're looking at the data you're getting, because you're getting it whether you know about it or not. Storage is free, so it's likely being stored. Diagnosing, so not just saying this looks funny, but going, what does this actually mean? What are they trying to tell us? So if you see 50,000 people on a web page, that might come across as really good, but if you see they spend an average of 2 seconds, that's really bad. So you have to always dig deeper. And then test remedies, and part of this is just testing on a smaller set of your users a new idea, seeing how they respond and then going bigger. Some of this is A/B or multivariate testing, where you test on a wide range, but showing different segments, different things, and really coming up with ways to give them products that help them do what they want to do, but better. And then lastly, sort of prescribe, and this process almost always has a loop back to the beginning. So it's almost a data spiral. You never are done. You're always going back to the start. So thinking within this framework, I'm going to talk about what we did around bullying earlier this year. So monitor and detect, this is our Google Analytics, part of it for 6 months prior to when we ran the campaign. So we launched the Facebook app, which allowed students to report on bullying in April. For 6 months prior, we could see what resource guides on our site they're looking at. And it turns out they're looking at bullying at a very, very, very high rate. And they're spending 5.5 minutes when they're there. So this is 10,000 hours of teens reading about bullying the 6 months prior. So we know it's a salient issue. But just because they are interested doesn't necessarily mean they want to take action. But luckily we have an action finder on our website. So this is something they use to help filter their responses. So they'll tell us, this is just almost picking projects. So they'll come in and they'll say what cause, who with, where, how long they want to run it. And based on these, we'll filter any offerings at any given time. These are the 11 causes they can select from. We sort of fit everything into these buckets. It's not a perfect system, but it's good for filtering content. And when you look at this, you see that bullying and violence is the #1 issue they actually want to take action on. If you go back previously, you'll see disasters or something they were really interested in reading about, but it's near the bottom for things they actually want to take immediate action with. So now we have sort of 2 pieces of the puzzle, and the last is sort of how do they want to do this? And we can sort of see when you ask who with the next follow-up question when they're filtering, the people that care about bullying primarily want to do it as an individual action or with school or friends. It's not something they're doing with their sports team. So sort of the diagnosis you end up with this, it's something they're interested in, it's something they have a desire to actually take action on, and then how do they want to do it? And it's solo action, and then some people wanting to do it with friends and involve their school. And then we also run a national survey. So we asked people already, do you consider Facebook sharing? You know, is that a real action? Do you think that's impactful? How does it affect you? And sort of triangulating that, you see that they do think it's, you know, important. They do think when they see it, it changes themselves. And so we know that not only are they interested, not only do they want to take action, we sort of start figuring out this platform. They can go on Facebook, they can do it by themselves, they can share with their friends. So in early April, we launched a Facebook app. We do it in partnership with the movie Bully, so help get some press around it. And the basic idea of the app is you come in and you fill out your email to sign up and register, install the app, and then you answer 8 closed-ended questions like this. And the questions aren't perfect. They were designed by the people that made the movie. It was meant to be sort of an amplifier of their cause. It wasn't a data product from the start. So you have 8 closed-ended questions, and then you have 1 open-ended question at the end, asking about how they would actually affect this change if they were involved in the conversation. Then they tell us what school they're at, so we can help grade their school. And then they would give them a grade. This was a very basic algorithm. It was just sort of a bell curve. Were they below or above average? Nothing terribly fancy. This was just sort of letting them have a response, sort of making it a game, which again is a responsive thing that we know they want and actually makes this a shareable experience. And then we'd ask them to post about it if they wanted. So you could customize a post, you could share your grade, and then you could sort of amplify your own individual experience. So the monitoring, we ended up to date with almost 200,000 installs of the application, which exceeded our initial projections several-fold over. We were expecting this to be a month-long campaign with 25,000 people. And we ended up with 200,000 people and 70% of them completing all the questions. As far as the amplification, we can track these shares. We see 2.8 million people have actually read about this. Thousands of those people have clicked through and found more resources. We've touched roughly a quarter of third all secondary schools in the nation. And all of that's great, but is the data usable? Is this actually useful or interesting data? Is this useful to us? Is it interesting to academics? What can we actually get out of this now that we have a massive data set on our users, like #1 issue? And it's a nice problem to have. And so we start cutting it down and cleaning out duplicate answers or people whose stated age and the age that Facebook's already verified don't match up, because we can pull in all their social graph information. And we make them register with verifiable schools. Not everyone does. Some people type them in funny. Some people in college graded their college, which is great, but we're not focusing on college bullying for this campaign. So when you clean all these out, only focus on people that have data that's as verifiable as at least their Facebook information is, you end up with about 50,000. So about a quarter of them are actually usable data points. And those are data points that have all the school level data pulled in and social graph, which is gender, age, whatever. So the lesson for us was it takes a whole lot of installs to get a usable data set. If we would have had our original 20,000 people, we'd be talking today about 4,000 anecdotal data points and not a lot of depth. So 50,000 is where you start being able to run this through statistical models and see what the reliance is and figure out if it's useful. So what does it say? And it's sort of crap that I'm the person talking to you about bullying data and not some of the people in the audience, because I'm not a bullying expert. I'm a website data scientist. I focus on building products or getting people to click buttons or social psychology, what works, what doesn't. So this is just the first pass. All this data will be available, but just running it through basic cleaning, basic statistical, a binary logistic regression model, I'll show you what we find so far. How salient is the issue? And again, you'll notice that these responses, this is a chatty quiz. This is almost like being able to mine the data of a 17 quiz. But the interesting thing is not maybe the absolute values reported, but the relative differences. We've compared this to outside data sets, and we notice the same trends between guys and girls, charter and public schools, seniors and freshmen. So we know we're getting the right order. So we know there's some interplay in our data set, even though it's probably biased because everyone opted in. That's still a very valuable indicator of what policy could be used or what further research is needed. So looking here, you see that gender alters perception. Females were more likely to report bullying as a problem. Charter schools fare considerably better, except at the most severe option we offered kids, in which case they almost come back. So kids that are having the worst experience, it doesn't matter if you had a charter school or a public school, or the difference really narrows. How frequent is the issue? So 28% of the students report witnessing bullying on a daily basis. And it's important, this is witnessing. We didn't ask about their own experience, it's about what they view. So all our numbers sort of skew higher. Most ask about, have you been bullied? This is asking, are you around bullying? Slightly different, but you see the same sort of patterns develop. So a quarter of kids roughly see bullying on a daily basis, and 7 in 10 see it happening once a week. Here, the gender gap disappears, and charter schools again fare better. How pervasive is the issue? And at this slide, and the data from this question really caught us, because every place a student has to go throughout their day, they report witnessing elevated levels of bullying. And places they're required to be, like classrooms, hallways, cafeterias, are almost near the top. And then you also have online bullying, which they're around, and they spend over 4.5 hours a day online on the typical day. That's the highest yet. So just looking at the gender breakdown here, you notice that female students are more likely to report bullying in almost every location, with the notable exception being locker rooms. But at the top of the list for both, you have hallways, lunchroom, and the classroom, and online, sorry. So very similar trends between the two. Guys, again, sort of seeing the issue as less important or less aware of it. And then there's this 11th category, somewhere else. Even giving them 10 places, we're still missing quite a bit with these questions. Obviously, further research is needed. Where is this someplace else that 1/4 of kids are seeing bullying? That's a non-trivial amount of bullying that's happening outside what I would consider these very broad categories. And then methods of bullying. So how do they report seeing other students in their school bully each other? So male students are reporting more physical abuse, female students more emotional abuse. When we overlay this data with the methods of bullying, we notice that there's a strong correlation between emotional abuse and cell phone bullying for females, none such relationship, just in sort of an odds of those two happening at the same time for males. For males, there's this exceptionally strong correlation between them reporting bathrooms as a source of bullying and physical abuse. When they report bathroom bullying, they're twice as likely to report that there's physical abuse happening in their schools, which is a very, if you're trying to think of how can we change our schools and make them better, it's fixing these supervisory blind spots. Most schools don't let teachers into the bathroom. You have a staff bathroom and a student bathroom. And lo and behold, that's the one area that's most correlative with the most, heinous form of bullying, actually physically abusing another students, where teachers can't go anymore. That's an easy problem to fix, or an easy thing to research more. And the part of the good news here is it starts to get better. So, and this matches up with a lot of external data sets. You look at the perceptions from 9th grade all the way up to 12th grade, and if you carried this out to middle schoolers, you'd see the same trends. People in the last year of middle school report higher than people in the first year of high school, roughly speaking. And you have name-calling, teasing, physical abuse, emotional abuse, all declining along the same sort of tapering off. As you see up here is frequency, if you've seen it at least once a day, combining the once and multiple times a day categories. But what you don't see, and this is troubling, is cyberbullying and text-based bullying following a similar pattern. Those types of bullying increase as students get older. So as they're getting older, they're not abusing each other in school or in traditional things, but they're doing it when they're online. They're doing it over the forum. They're getting, I don't know if sophisticated is the right word, but it's this trend that's present throughout all the data, cutting it by state, all of that, you still see this happening. And then when you talk about how they want this problem to be addressed, there is a massive expectation gap. So you have 76% of teens saying that they want others to intervene when it's happening, but only 16% actually seeing it often or always. Half of teens see it never or rarely, some intervention. And so there's tons of policy implications here that should be further explored. I'm not the one to recommend them, but clearly there's a disconnect between what students want and what they're getting. And we also are able to look at the probability they report on, do our teachers intervene? And then we can see how they look at other answers. Do students intervene? We can look at their other answers. So we know intervention works, or at least suggests that it works. So the probability of physical abuse drops by almost 10% when students also report that their classmates intervene. Teacher intervention rates have no effect on this. School administrator, it doesn't matter what they tick for that, no correlation. Other students, that's what's working in these supervisory blind spots. Conversely, teachers are the ones who have the biggest impact for classrooms. 54% of students report witnessing bullying in their classrooms. So that's areas where teachers are present. And when teachers are routinely intervening in those things, you see that rate drop. And it's the most salient variable in the data set that sees this drop. So now what? We have all the data available to us, we have 30 data points on each one of these students, over 50,000 users. That's over 1 million data points on bullying. And we're an organization focusing on action. So how do we pivot? First, we're actually retooling our campaigns team. We're having a full-time position who actually focuses on campaigns and researches around bullying, because we see it's a blind spot. We have a data scientist talking to you about bullying, not our bullying expert today. That's something we could do better at. We launched the national petition recently, centered on one of the major themes to that last question of students just wanting to be part of the discussion of how to fix it. And in the month and a half it's been active, we've had almost 50,000 kids sign on to this, and we'll use this again to amplify their voice. And then more recently, we've created an SMS game, text-based game, that simulates the first day of school for students and sort of gives them a choose-your-own-adventure book over text where they learn where they can intervene and how to do it. And we're seeing amazing patterns in their behavior. They sort of leave their finger in the book and start going down the naughty path, not like how it turns out for them, and then back up and go down the intervene path, or back up and not be part of the problem. So it's some basic level of like Pavlovian conditioning we're seeing through these students there. And in the first 3 weeks, we've had 50,000 kids go through this, and they've sent us 800,000 messages. So again, we're lucking into another massive data set here of how students see bullying and what paths they take, and if they, at the end of those, if they tell their friends about the experience, or if they don't, where these students live, are there regional variations? We can also then follow up with these students, so we're now sending these 50,000 kids questions about how they're dealing with bullying, and we can follow up with them later and see if any change that comes from this sticks. And then lastly, and I've mentioned this, we're going to release the full data set, so all 1.5 million data points with school anonymized, so we don't have anything that can identify a student, but with grade in school, all of these things, because the best people to be looking at this are the people that care the most about this. If you notice on the first slide, we sort of got them in with the hook, you tell us, we'll tell the world. And I think this is our end of the contract to actually get their like aggregated anonymous opinions out there so people can actually take a much deeper dive and start layering this with their own data sets or with their own models or their own assumptions. We've also taken up on our website and we've mapped a large portion of their recommendations on how to fix bullying. So you can go through these on our website right now, and you can see that this student in Utah said, when teachers need to not make fun of kids, it shows that it's okay to bully other students. So now their voices are all in aggregate. Each one of these pins is someone who has a recommendation for bullying. And you can go through, we left all their grammar and text usage intact, so it's not a perfect from a grammatical point of view, but it's a pretty interesting insight. You'll see a lot of kids pushing towards zero tolerance policies, which I'm sure a lot of people in the room, and myself included, know aren't very effective. So there's a big communications gap. But they've definitely heard that zero tolerance is a way out. Where are they getting this message? It's not us. It's probably no one here that's putting anything out. But they have this idea that zero tolerance is a really big thing. They want stricter punishment, not more lenient punishment. Very strange. Yes, not for themselves. Well, and that's another interesting thing. If you look at research, he was saying they want stricter punishment for others, not themselves. Very few students fall purely into the bullied or bullying category. Most kids are both bullied and the recipient of like someone else's verbal abuse. So it's very strange, I think your point speaks a lot to how they view this issue. They're not the problem, it's other people are the problem. And if we could do this again, I would love to ask questions to sort of figure out how they see themselves in this ecosystem. So the full data set will be available at dosomething.org/bully report. You can email me with any questions, you can follow me, you can follow Do Something. And those are the meat and potatoes of what we found, but there's so much more nuance here. Students' intervention in any one of these after-school activities and things like that actually have far more impact than teachers. Any sort of mashing up of these data points, massively successful. I'll move from here, and I think we have a little time before we want to go to questions. And I sort of want to talk briefly, I didn't know if I'd have time to get to this, social change and do something at the broader level. So sort of what we were speaking about earlier. you know what, I covered this. I think questions would probably be more helpful now. If you could come up to the microphones. Nancy, do you want to come field?
So I'm a researcher at Harvard Business School, and we study social networks, specifically related to finance, but it's similar, sort of. The question is, so within Facebook, within their API, you can access under the permissions like user stream or friend stream. So if you have the access token for the user, you can then get all of the posts they've ever posted, and you can get all of their friends' posts that they've ever posted. So my question is, within your Facebook app, if you change the permissions such that you can then get all those posts, could you basically get all of the instances of bullying that are happening on Facebook and then map that to your data so that you can then track it in real time? And I mean, with 50,000 people, let's say 200 unique friends each, that's 10 million people, and then a lot of, I mean, that's billions of posts. So you could identify in real time, and then you could create an algorithm to just figure it out.
So that's definitely possible with calls to the Facebook API, but it all requires permissions when they authenticate an app, and each additional permission you do almost universally halves the opt-in rate. So adding permissions like that in the front end, you're going to go from 200,000 installs down to 100, you add another one down to 50,000. So students are very skeptical of Facebook. On our website, we make mobile an optional field when they sign up because it's a preferred form of communication. About 75% voluntarily give us their mobile number. When we do the same thing within a Facebook app, that percentage drops to 20%. So just putting something in a Facebook wrapper makes people trust you a whole lot less. And then you can speak to maybe the crisis text line, which would get to the sort of baseline idea.
Okay. Because we do so much texting, and so for example, on Tuesday we texted out, is anybody on our texting list already? On Tuesday we texted out to 623,000 people, just on Tuesday. We're adding about 25,000 people a week. It's really starting to really grow rapidly. And the text we sent out on Tuesday was just a quote about like being good to yourself or something like that. And we asked you to send back who you would want to hear a celebrity quote from. We were just trying to peg people into sort of celebrity buckets and tag them on the back end. And maybe we thought that they would forward the quote to a friend. So that's what we asked for. We get, as a surprise, a couple of dozen text backs from people about crises that they're in. So, help, I'm being bullied. Even when we sent out a quote about being good to yourself, or I was cutting, my parents found out, I stopped, but I started an hour ago. And the worst one we ever received was, he won't stop raping me, he told me not to tell anyone, it's my dad. We received that about a year ago. We don't ask for these, we don't put ourselves out there as an expert in this stuff, but they trust us and they apparently trust the medium. So we've decided to build as a subsidiary of Do Something. It will have its own name, its own board, its own team, something called the Crisis Text Line. It'll be like a 911 but by text for young people. So no one will hear you talking to a hotline. It can be private. Because we'll get your mobile number, we'll be able to check on you a couple days later and say like, how you doing, or here's another resource for you, or we're thinking of you, which is great to be able to provide these referrals and counseling by text. But what's really awesome about it is, again, the data. And we spent half the day talking about this today over the Media Lab, which is the ability to use AI and machine learning and tag this stuff and learn from it. That most of the good social work that's done around eating disorders, bullying, dating abuse, suicide, depression, unfortunately is done with victims and survivors. That most of the work is done after the fact. But if you had the data, if you put the data out there, you might actually be able to see patterns. You might actually be able to do preventative work. so that some of this shit just gets stopped with to begin with, and you're not just dealing with the victims and survivors. So we're pretty excited about the possibility of turning the lights on in a space where there is no national census, there is no real-time data on eating disorders. We don't know what time of day is worse for dating abuse. We don't know what time of year is the worst for some of this stuff. We don't know the interplay between some of the issues, except with big longitudinal studies that take a long time to occur. If we had this stuff in real time, it could be pretty exciting. And we would, again, the same philosophy at Do Something. Our job is to do sort of social change. So when we get this data, we have decided as an organization we want to make as best as possible it available and open under a Creative Commons license for you all in the academy or in a police department or on a school board or at a foundation to use to inform your work. We are happy to give you that data and data exhaust.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bob Stallman. I spent the morning with you, and it was great. My head is swimming with all the things I learned, and it's extremely creative. So I have a couple of questions, and they're based on a concern. I mean, this is not a critical concern, but they're
Anytime someone starts to compliment in their question, I know a zinger's coming. So go ahead, bring it.
No, it's not even as it's not, but it's just I want to contextualize the comment a little bit. It's that in some ironic way, I'm going to overstate this. Sylvia and I have done a paper for Harvard Ed Review that's going to come out in December that has the exact same findings with 23 participants. So it is not the number of participants that is crucial here for certain kinds of questions. So I think the challenge is what are the kind of powerful questions that large data sets really can get you to that you couldn't get otherwise, and then what are you going to do with them? So that's my comment. I just want to work with you guys, you know.
Great.
What you're doing is what I would call, I think I got this right, I may have it wrong, it's low inference data that requires high interpretation. That is, it's very hard to interpret. It looks easier to make you can make an interpretation in your head about what you're getting, but you can't really be sure what your interpretation is. Those kids don't trust you. I would argue vehemently that the use of the word trust is totally incorrect. They're desperate. It's not that they trust you. If you look at the research on abused and neglected children growing up, they throw themselves at anybody. Okay, so the use of the word trust at the adult level is not the same meaning that you have developmentally for the young kids. Now you know that, but I just wanted to say it out loud. So really, the only thing I want you to speak to is sustainability of your work. That means, will you stick with this? It worries me. You give a presentation at the beginning which says, you know, everything is quick, 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 jump, jump, jump. I think it was incredibly creative and powerful and meaningful presentation. I worry that you'll do the same thing. You'll jump from one thing to the other. You won't stick with something. And if you don't stick with the problem, you're not going to solve it. My dad told me years ago, we're from New York also, or New Jersey, and he said the problem with merchandise managers is they don't stick with their product long enough. And I think even in today's climate, that's still true.
So here's our product. Here's our customer. It's teenagers. I mean, what we care about at Do Something is young people and social change. What we're really trying to deal with is what we call an inactivity gap. Our enemy is apathy. Our enemy is not necessarily the homeless animals or or kids being bullied. Our enemy is apathy, and that's what our organization does, is we listen to what young people care about, and in an authentic way, we reach out to them and give them a way to take action on that. We're not the organization that's going to, like I said, change their behavior necessarily or lecture to them ever. We think they're awesome now as is with all their spots. So yeah, while bullying is something they care about, bullying is something we'll focus on. And what we know, which I wish more not-for-profits would have the self-awareness to know, is what we do well, we do that well. And what we don't do well, we don't do all this research stuff. We're not interested in it. Jeff himself said to you, I focus on conversion points on the site. We're looking at optimizing opt-ins and usage so that we can get more and more kids in our system. But if this data is useful to you all, we're happy to open it up and share it with the world. I mean, the first question on Facebook and Facebook's capabilities, the next time Cheryl comes to town, why don't you ask Cheryl if Cheryl will just build that on top of Facebook and monitor this. Apparently bullying is one of the things, and cyberbullying is one of the things that's personally dear to her heart, and it's an issue that they care about. Why doesn't Facebook just open up that data and give it to you? They've got a heck of a lot more data and people on staff than we do. So although we are a team of only 50, we're going to run 24 campaigns this year, and we've got other work to do. We feel it's important for the cause and the health and well-being of young people to make this data available to other people who will use it well. Go for it.
And I think to the first part, you were talking about how it's really wide shot. We're getting tons of data, but a lot of it's probably crap, and most of it's garbage. Some of, I mean, like what web browser they're using to look at things, like we're storing all of that, that's garbage. I don't need to know which version of IE it is. So a lot of it's garbage, not all of it. Most of it's, maybe most of it's interesting, but there's a lot of garbage. But it's a wide range of data, so we're very responsive. So when you talk about having to do things repeatedly, we sort of do things until our nervous system responds in such a way that says, this isn't wanted anymore, this is broken. So because we're dealing with a moving target, teenagers age out, obviously what they care about is going to age out as well. So there is, we run campaigns multiple years, and some of our most successful, we're in the 3rd or 4th, so there is a learning, and we're getting better. But no, valid point.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation. I'm a former middle and high school principal. I want to say I applaud the fact that you are defining bullying very broadly to incorporate things like exclusion and things like that. Oftentimes when I find you have conversations with students, unless you are kind of careful with that, they tend to underreport drastically. And so I'm really encouraged that you're doing that and having that conversation. I'm also really glad to see you focusing on this age group and asking them to take action now. I think that's not something we do enough, asking kids at this age to really start to be good people right now. And that brings me to my question, which is you have these various campaigns, like with the blue jeans or the animals or things like that. To what extent are students involved in developing the ideas for that action? And then the second part of that, then when they respond to your campaigns and take action, and maybe they have like successive iterations of that or variations of that in their local community, are you doing anything to kind of network them and get them to learn laterally from each other? Thank you.
Great. So we're running a campaign right now, for example, called Give a Spit, which is all about cheek swabbing and growing the bone marrow registry. Apparently, bone marrow is most ripe to be a match in 18 to 24-year-olds. So they need more young people on the bone marrow registry, and most people, 70% of people do not find a match in their own family, so they need to go to the bone marrow registry. So running this campaign was inspired by a 12-year-old who was in our system who uploaded a project. We have over 40,000 projects on our website that are just random things that kids have uploaded that they're doing, and we'll call through it and find stuff. This is a kid named Pat Pedraja from Tampa, Florida. He's half Hispanic, and it was very hard for him to find a match. He had leukemia because he's half Hispanic and there weren't enough people of color in the registry. He finally found a match. It wasn't a 10 out of 10, but he found a match and lived and survived and said to his mom, if we make it through this, we've got to grow, at the age of 12, we've got to grow the registry. So he and his mom started an organization called Driving for Donors. And that basically meant that they got in the car that summer and they drove to Hispanic markets around the country and encouraged Hispanics to join the bone marrow registry. And the way they paid for the trip was if you gave them money for gas or money for a hotel room, they put your name on his bald head. He's a very sweet kid. He's totally healthy today, and he has been part of making this campaign. He actually took the afternoon off from school and came by train. He's at school in Connecticut. He came by train into the city last week to help us plan this campaign. We love when young people give us the ideas. I say that we're probably in thirds in the organization. A third of the ideas from our campaigns come from just kids at large. A third come from kind of any level of the staff, and a third come from what I would say top down. And that would either be like me or a sponsor who has a good idea for something, but it's probably in thirds.
Hi, I'm Kimmy Wolf. I graduated from here a few years ago. Bob and Rick were both my professors, and now I'm launching a health and wellness platform for teenage girls. And I also graduated from Brown, so I'm psyched that you're here. You guys make it look super easy. I watch your campaigns. What's the hardest thing about working with teenagers and getting them activated on social media and on the ground?
What do you think?
Very good question. So the hardest thing about getting kids active on social media, I think translating actions off platforms, it almost universally doesn't work. Like translating likes into kids donating jeans, or translating text with someone to them getting someone else cheek swab. It's when you make them do something that's not natural to the platform, it doesn't really work for them. If they're doing something over text, they want to be able to complete the action from their phone. If they're, running a drive, they don't want to have to, scan a QR code. Like, they don't want to they don't want to artificially do things. Like, a lot of what we end up doing is solving problems we've created for teens, not problems they actually have in the volunteer space. So as we get smarter and actually start, anticipating what are the real needs, not how do we get them to put their, phone number in a website, because clearly that's how you collect cans. When to them it just seems silly. So like, that's the biggest issue. How do you not make them do things that just feel arbitrary? Because when you do, it doesn't work.
And I would say that the biggest challenge that we have is remembering that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen 66% of the time and talk 33% of the time. That when we get in trouble, when we run bad campaigns, they're tater tot campaigns. They're the campaigns, so they're campaigns that kids don't care about those issues. So I'll give you a couple examples of failures. So we ran a campaign last year called Update Your Status. And the idea was get an HIV test and declare your status, on Facebook, update your status, And kids are really concerned with being HIV positive. I mean, most kids are not concerned. Most teenagers are really not, they're concerned with STDs. If we had done this about STDs, about genital warts or some other kind of thing, getting pregnant, that might have gone well. But HIV, kids today are not really talking about, not concerned about. Another failed campaign, we did a music education campaign. Music education they love, but what we asked them to do was to tell their school boards to keep education in their schools. And we're not gonna do any, first of all, we're not gonna do any more of these like lobbying or tell school boards. Why? Because kids really don't care about politics. They don't, and you know what? Politicians don't care what they think. And so all of these organizations that are like, we wanna give you a voice, speak out. It's just a broken brand promise that you're giving to kids. Politicians really don't care what 17-year-olds think. You know why? 17-year-olds don't vote. 18-year-olds don't vote either, but 17-year-olds can't vote until we lower the voting age, which is another issue we can talk about. But so to give them a broken brand promise of like, it's gonna matter if you speak to your school board. The only time that ever mattered was when Kevin Bacon did it in the movie. Pop culture, that was for you, Rick. That's the only time it ever mattered, and he saved music in that little town. But so when we do things that we think matters, they don't. So people have tried to get us to do an obesity campaign, like I said about tater tots, and I'm saying no. But we're not going to do a like eat better, fat kid campaign. No, like that's. Somebody else will do that campaign, but not do something. And they will have like 10, you'll do it right. And you'll have like 10 kids participate in that, the 10 kids who already care about nutrition. But if you position the campaign as, it's not fair that there's not good fruit or a salad bar at our school, go with the word fairness and make this like a fairness and justice issue. Let kids get pissed off. Now you have a campaign. Now you're talking. So, but just saying, who wants to have a finger in their face? And I don't want to point it.
Thanks for a great presentation. I missed the very beginning, so please cut me off if you already answered this. But I heard someone recently talk about the idea for cyberbullying of kids doing online monitoring and kind of reporting in. And I don't know very much about it, but it sounds like a really interesting idea that's kind of in line with a lot of your vision. Is that something that you guys have talked about? Or what are the issues around that? I'm just curious if you could speak to that a little.
It's not really something that we've talked about, because again, it's not really what we do. But I mean, this is really just community monitoring. So a couple things. We've been talking a lot about Facebook, but actually, I don't know if your research bears this out, but you'll see worse bullying on YouTube. And back in the old days of MySpace, it was worse also. Why? Because they're fake screen names. You're not identifiable. So the sad thing that we've been seeing on Facebook is the kind of bullying that you see on Facebook are things that are culturally acceptable. So like when someone says something homophobic on Facebook, they're doing it under their own name. It's Jim Smith said this horrible homophobic thing. And apparently, Jim Smith doesn't feel bad about people knowing that he's a homophobic person.
And then
so,
10 of Jim Smith's friends will like him. Yeah, it's very.
And apparently that's okay in that community. So it's bigger than just what is okay to say and what it's not okay to say. It's social norms, which is something that I understand Harvard is going to be focusing on. It's what's acceptable and what isn't. It's why it's hard for me when someone like Ann Coulter says earlier this week, oh, last week was National Coming Out Day, today should be Disown Your Sunday. That is an irresponsible move by an adult. An irresponsible move that it's okay to say something hateful online and encourage something like that means that it's okay to do that under your real name, to put that out there. That's hurtful. And I'm speechless on that one.
Hi. I'm really impressed with what you're doing, and you spoke a little bit about your offshoot to sort of address the issues that come in, but I was hoping you could speak a little more to sort of your legal and ethical obligations to the individuals.
So I spent 6 years in law school. I was on the 6-year plan. Didn't really like law school very much. It was painful for all of those years. And then I didn't take the bar because I don't think we need more lawyers, although my father still asks me sometimes when I'm going to take the bar and get a real job. Someday he'll understand that's not going to happen. So yes, lots of legal. Our first priority is, to quote Tron, is to fight for the user. Our real priority, we are there for young people. I mean, more than there for any research or any funder, we're there for young people and we really believe in them. And so that means that even though footnote 18 in COPPA says that not-for-profits don't have to comply, we try and comply as best as possible to the letter and spirit of that because we care about protecting young people. So where the crisis text line is concerned, our colleague Bob Philbin in the back of the room, our other data scientist, there's Bob, is spending a lot of time thinking about data encryption, data dumping, and how to protect young people. It's one of the reasons why, for example, on DoSomething.org, we will never enable one-on-one chat or messaging. There are two reasons. One is, I used to have a fear of like Michael Jackson trolling our site late at night to meet young boys. Can I say that now that he's dead? That was much better when he was alive. I really can't, can I? No, okay. So like it would be my worst nightmare if if a pedophile came to our site. Not that I'm saying he was a pedophile. Like there are lawyers watching this, whatever. So we don't want inappropriate behavior happening in one-on-one communication, but also in a place like Do Something where it's all about social change, why would you want to enable a one-on-one private conversation that nobody else could see and learn from and be like, ooh, I want to bring that to Wisconsin? There's no point in one-on-one. So anybody who's thinking about designing a social change new network or something like that, please don't enable one-on-one conversation. You want lots of people to learn and be inspired. So we think about these things all the time. The fighting for our user, the safety and health and power and passion of teenagers is what's utmost.
Yeah, I think I was talking with Uwe a couple of weeks ago about texting. We actually came up with a way to take two users and have them anonymously talk to each other. And then we both looked at each other and said, oh my God, we just invented sex roulette or something. And like tabled the idea. It's just amazing, like it's a really cool technology idea, but like as soon as we sat and looked at it, we're like, this is absolutely horrible. So
Uwe is one of our engineers.
Yeah, mobile engineer, so very present in our minds.
Hi, I'm Philip. I remember reading an article in the New York Times about how like teenagers like don't always use the word bullying to describe like what like adults see as bullying, and we'll say like drama or something else. And Jeff started to answer this, but I was wondering whether there's a disconnect like between the way that you are defining bullying or like imagining bullying and the way that like students, I don't know, leaving comments on the site or something like that might define bullying for themselves.
Possibly. There's some really interesting work going on actually by a student at the Media Lab, by a graduate student there, who's doing really interesting work. And he's worked with a thin line at MTV, if you go online there and see it, where he's tagging words, and he's created a very interesting algorithm where he can spot for some of that. And it's really interesting. It's one of the reasons why we want to partner with them and work with them on some of this, so that no one falls through the cracks.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'm just wondering, so I work for an after-school program in South Boston, and we serve late elementary, early middle school students, and they're really interested in bullying too, and talk about it often. And I know that they are not really the people we want on social media, or, I mean, there are issues with having them on social media, but have you thought about how to approach them and how to make them part of the conversation?
I mean, we want every young person, and we wanted them all on Facebook, obviously starting at the age of 13, so per COPPA. I mean, we'd welcome them no matter where they are, all over the states. We tend to follow the American footprint. I mean, we tend to just follow, and we're always surprised in our office, like, wow, look how many kids we have in Nebraska. I mean, we just sort of tend to follow the footprint of the United States. I do think there's a lot of work to be done with younger people who we can't reach, and we wouldn't reach because they are under 13. And so it wouldn't be appropriate for us, I mean, kind of to the question before about privacy, it wouldn't be appropriate for us to be asking for their personal information or keeping them in our system. And I believe that. I mean, I don't think it would necessarily be appropriate for us.
And it's an opportunity, because we look at our typical user, it ends up being someone around 17 years old and most likely female. So even with our wide reach, we know that we do have some over-indexing for certain groups. So there is an opportunity there for 13, 14, 15-year-olds. And when you look at, we're releasing, and Bob's will probably know more about this than I would, but we're releasing a national survey, and we see that as students get older, their volunteering behavior increases. And I believe there's a slight peak when they're in their last year of middle school, then it dips down in their first year of high school again. So there's something about being the big kid that makes kids feel more responsible that we're seeing. So an 8th grader in the traditional school system is more likely to volunteer than a 9th grader. So there's like an opportunity to make kids feel important at different points just by making them feel like they're being listened to.
Should we take one more question? Anyone want the last word?
Oh.
Is there anybody else who wants to ask more questions? Bob knows how to get in touch with us by email. Does anybody else have one, just want like a grad student want the last word, or a question, or someone, an alum?
So I'm an alum, but of the Div school, but just came in from Hawaii today, and I'm a grad student in Hawaii. But one of the things that I was wondering about, you have students who are grading their schools on bullying, and I'm just wondering if you've seen many grades from the same school, one, and two, are any faculty or administrators getting in contact and saying, I didn't know that this was the grade that our school gets, and also kind of wanting some advice or anything from you all, if you could speak to that a little bit.
So we see clustering. We have 10,000 schools that we have answers from, and there's a sort of a long tail of schools that have a handful, but we have over 100 schools that have 20+ responses. So we have these sort of network effects where at some school you have a kid who's a promoter of sorts, who's actually taken the time to share about it or post about it to get his classmates to do it. So we sort of have this remapping of their social graph. So we do have some schools. So I think our most, we have a school that has almost 50 kids that have graded the school, which is fascinating. We have all these like social connections of our members now that we never had before, which is valuable for a whole wide range of leveraging it. But to a broad point for the teachers, I don't think we've been contacted by a school administrator yet, which might speak to the fact that they're not Facebook friends with their students. Or if so, they're not using that as a as a channel to sort of tattle on their students with us or something. But no administrators yet. We toyed with the idea of going to these schools where we actually have some density of responses, and then getting in touch with those individual schools and going, just thought you'd like to know, 40 kids at your school reported on bullying, and all of them said that the cafeteria is just the worst. Just an FYI. But there's a lot of implications. The data is not a perfect data set for absolute statements. It's a much stronger data set for sort of relative statements. How do guys and girls differ?
It's not what we do.
And it's
not what we do.
But could a administrator contact you if there aren't Facebook friends with the student? Could they see what students are saying about their school?
No. And even then, we never gave a student's individual responses out to their social graph. So you wouldn't find out that Nancy had said the cafeteria is just a horrible place. You just go, Nancy said the school got a D, and the national average ended up being a C thanks to the magic of bell curves. So like, you would know that Nancy's experience was, you know, slightly worse off, or her perceptions were slightly worse off, but only in a relative sense. We didn't actually give away anyone's individual responses. We weren't comfortable with that. I don't think anyone wants to say they're the kid that gets picked on in the locker room and then have all their friends all of a sudden know.
Terrible.
So only an aggregate there.
So I guess I thank you for having us, and I'm gonna. Oh, Bob's at 10 questions. He's gonna email me. I guess what I want to do is encourage you, especially those of you who are principals or educators or academics who are really passionate about this space, to take this information and make something of it that will help these kids who are being bullied, and that will help your schools and institutions. That's why we're sharing it, so that you all can use it.